That you hadn't mentioned is that when you saw the kid get shot through that little crack in the shutter, and the big German who had done it, you had actually.
I realized that this was a man that we had met sometime during the summer before at the beach, which was not really a typical beach, but where people went and went swimming in the river. And somehow I don't remember how it happened that we met him or who introduced him, who said he was. We speak, we are on the beach, we speak German. But I remember meeting him and shaking his hand. Elsie was there, Oma was there, and we were all there at the beach, and some other people. And to think that this man is out there now shooting a little boy is just impossible to comprehend.
That you had met the guy and shaken his hand
Right.
and then seen him shoot somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just was very tall, big, young, but very young. He could not have been more than 20 or 21. Very young guy.
So you had stayed inside for 3 or 4 days?
Oh, I was so afraid to move. I don't know if Gerhard or anybody else went out before, but I didn't dare to go out of that apartment, the place. And then, as I said before, the eerie silence that was then in that area every night is unbelievable. The eerie silence, except if you heard a shot someplace and it echoed and vibrated, all around. Or maybe you heard an SS-man or someone marching by, but otherwise eerie silence. And I don't know how many days later, a few days later, some weeks later, I found out that the young man who tutored us, the piano teacher's son, somehow he came by and he said he is down at the working camp they had an iron factory was down, and that he is there in that working factory. And while he was in the house, I don't know how he got a chance to come in to see us at the time, he played the piano. He played very well. He played the piano very well. And he played one piece of music, which is one of my favorites. And he played it beautifully. And I don't know if I mentioned before, but I was very infatuated with him. I, looked up to him.
How old was he?
He might have been at that time 18 or 19.
And you were?
13 and a half or so. And he played this piece and I said, oh my goodness, is that beautiful? I wish I could play it. And somehow he mentioned then that he might be able to come back in another few weeks and see, and stop in and see us again. I don't know if it is through that he is on a working command and walks by and somehow he can get away and get in or something like that. And so since I was so infatuated with him and I liked that piece so much, I wanted to be able to play it for him when he comes back the next time.
You must have practiced it.
And I somehow, I don't know where, but I got the music someplace. And I practiced that piece of music all day long. And by the time I don't even remember, did he ever come back or not? He might not even have ever come back. I don't remember that part of it. But I learned to play that piece of music by heart. And it was out of my reach really. It was something much too technical, normally, for me. But that's what you can do when
you were motivated.
When you're motivated to something. And that was the only piece that I ever learned to play by heart. And it's still one of my favorite pieces. So that's how I was motivated. The one time I was motivated to learn a piece to play by heart. And eventually life kind of came back to normal. I don't know how human mind and human spirit works, but you just had to keep on living and almost block out what happened, but what happened, or what happened to these people, and had to keep on living. And I was very young, and as I said, I always had to be infatuated with someone. And seeing that this young teacher was now out of my life, and I didn't see him for a while,
Had to find a replacement.
I had to find somebody else. So Elsie had some friend. There was a young man, Polish young man, who I had seen quite a few times already when I was just a girl of 10 or 11, and but this time I saw him a few times when we went swimming near the river, and I thought, oh my God, he's handsome. I would like to get to know him. I would like to meet him, and so on. So one of Elsie's friends, I mentioned that to her once. I said, I'd like to get to meet Andrzej. Andrzej was his name. She said, oh, I can introduce you to him. I'm related to him. So somehow she eventually introduced me to him, and then we started, seeing each other. It was kind of a strange relationship. I was so innocent, and he was much older than I was. He was, I think, at the time, 20. And the strange way we met, we never made appointments. We never said we could meet each other here, we meet each other there, or come to my house. Never. I never was at his house, and he never really went into my house. So the only way we meet is when we went for a walk. And that was kind of a custom. We walked the Alea, it's called. We went for a walk. And I also had found a friend. She was Polish, and I got quite close to her, so we were always going for walks. And then all of a sudden he was walking with his friends, and he would detach himself from his friends and walk over to us, and we started walking. And that's all during the winter. We went, somehow we got ice skate someplace, and we went ice skating. I remember it was night, it was late at night, and the two of us were all alone on a pond,
Gee.
ice skating. And it was very romantic.
Sounds romantic.
Very romantic. And every time I met him, when I walked down, my girlfriend lived completely the opposite side of town. And when I walked Alea to get to her, usually I met him, and the two of us would walk off someplace, the woods or deserted areas, and just walk and walk. And he was really a very gentleman. He never really touched me, or we never even petted or anything like that. We was just walking and being nice. And this came to an end eventually, and that was because of my silliness. At that time, a lot of the Polish young boys went to the partisans. And he was also talking a lot of times, he really should join the partisans and this, but he never did. He didn't. I don't know if it was me that kept him back, or if it was because of me that he didn't go. And then one day we were also walking along, and I was very, as I say, only once I think did he kiss me, very lightly. And that one time we were joking around, and I was saying him, oh, in German. Like, he also spoke German, but most of the time he spoke Polish. He said, I said to him, oh, du bist verrückt, which means, oh, you're crazy, du bist verrückt. And he said, nein, ich bin nicht verrückt, ich bin verliebt. And verliebt means being in love. And I made fun of it. Oh, I said, who would you be in love with? How silly, this and that. And he kind of asked, aren't you, bist du nicht verliebt? And I made even more fun. Who would I be verliebt? And, it was really the happiest time of my life to hear him say he is in love, because he meant he's in love with me. And I just didn't know how to handle it, and I had to make fun of it. And instead of just showing how happy I was and that I'm in love too, I just kept making fun of it. And when we got back to my house, he said goodbye and bye. And as usual, we never make arrangements when will we see each other or when this. It always just haphazardly that we run into each other. And I never suspected that this was the last time I ever would see him. And
that must have been a shock.
The last time that I saw him. Because the next time I walked again the next day, and I walked again the next day, and Andrzej isn't to be seen anywhere. And eventually I run into one of his friends. And I didn't really come right out and ask him, where's Andrzej? Because this was kind of not the thing to do. And he mentioned, oh, Andrzej joined the partisans. And I almost fainted. Even though I tried not to show him that I am interested, that it means anything, but my heart just almost stopped. Andrzej joined the partisans. And then I knew I probably wouldn't see him. And a short while after that, some of our friends told us that they have heard rumors that the Germans want to take the two girls because Gerhard was still very young, and want to send us to a working camp. One of the friends said was working someplace for the Germans in one of their offices. And she said, you better get out of here right away, because we heard the rumors, and probably can happen anytime. So as soon as in the morning we got that information, or at noon, I don't remember what, Oma packed some suitcases for us, took us to the railroad station. The first train that came along, she bought a ticket, which is the next train, she bought a ticket and put us on the train.
Where'd you go?
As it happened, it was a town, a city called Częstochowa. So that was the last time I saw Ostrovitz. We never got back to Ostrovitz again. So Elsie and I went to Częstochowa. Whatever Oma had, money or things or cigarettes she gave us, because when you had cigarettes you could always trade for something. Cigarettes was like having money. And then we tried to find Elsie. Elsie was in charge. I was only at the time 14 or so. Elsie was in charge to try to find a room for us, to rent a room for us, and to get some food for us, and eventually find a job someplace. So, and I kept in touch with my girlfriend to ask if she has heard from Andrzej, if she knows where he is, and so on. And she said yes, she had seen him, and that at that time he was alive. But I never found out if he survived the war. I never really know if he was alive, if he survived the war, or if he was killed or what. And that's a terrible, terrible feeling. He was really, they say that's puppy love, you know, it's not really love. But to me,
Still real.
it wasn't, I can't call it puppy love. I was really so desperately in love with him. I was crazy about him. And I call that's still love. Though it's kind of, because he's never really out of my mind. There's always a part that I remember, that I have the feeling still that I felt for him.
So what happened with you and Elsie now that you've been on this train and sent someplace?
Well, we got to Czechoslovakia, and Elsie somehow found herself a job in a factory. You know, for Elsie was always easy. Oh, I shouldn't forget to say that we had, everybody in the German occupied area had to have some kind of identification. And Oma got us identification cards that said, we are Polish. And the color of Polish identification cards. But on the bottom of the card it said, Mother German, just written in. And on below that it said, Father Jewish. So naturally, it was the Jewish, we knew it would be disaster. So we tried to make some spots and smudge on it. You couldn't read what it said.
Yeah.
So it was just visible Mother German. It's a Polish identification, but you couldn't see what it said on the bottom there at all. So with these cards, somehow we were kind of safe, as long as nobody knew us. And Elsie found a job there, and then she found me a little job there too. Nothing important, just to say that I'm working there and get paid a little bit. But anything you get paid wasn't enough to really buy food. So I remember what we did at one time in order to get more food. The Germans were looking for people to come and feed lice. They were in little boxes, millions of lice in these little boxes, and they stuck them on you, and they're sucked, because they live on human blood. They wanted to do for some kind of serum or whatever that they needed the lice. We decided we're going to do it because we need the money, and they gave extra rations. They gave you butter, and they gave you some other things, which were hard to get. So we went there.
Let me get this straight. They were going to put these lice on you to feed?
What they did. Yes.
Okay.
And they started out with just one box, which had two, like a cage on one side, a cage on another side. That's where the lice were in. And the bottom, it was kind of like a grate, but they could get through to you. They could do. And they were kind of strapped on you. So we did that for the first time. Okay. Oh, wow. You didn't. First of all, you couldn't see what's in the boxes. If you would have seen, probably, just to put the box on you. And we tried that, I think, for 1 week. But after you had these things on, the itching was insane, was awful. Afterwards, when we said, let's try it a little longer. After a week, we get our big ration, whatever they give us for it. So we stuck it out for a week, but then that's it. We had to give up. And then they put more on. First they start with 1, and then 2 and 3, and you had 4 of these things or 5 of these things on you, And the itching afterwards, just terrible. And here they're sucking your blood too, So we did it just for 1 week, and we got our first ration, and Elsie said, no, that's it. We don't do it anymore.
No more of this.
No.
So what happened after that?
Oh, well, this now starts a different episode. We stayed there. Did we stay during one winter? Goodness, I don't even remember. Or was it just summer and the fall? And
did you have any contact with Oma at this point?
Yes, with Oma we had contact, right. And Oma came to see us once.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time, Now in the area where we lived, Ostrovets, they were already very close. The Russians were coming closer and closer, and they could hear the guns, and there was fighting. And Oma decided she is not going to stay there. Anyhow, when Opa left at the time, we made arrangements that any of our family who survives the war would try to get back to Bette an der Ruhr. That's where I was born. That's where we would meet after the war. That would be our meeting place. So the Russians, when the Russians came closer, anyhow, you had bad stories from the Russians. You didn't want to stay there when the Russians came. Somehow, anything you heard the Russians, it seems to be you're locked up. You can never get out. You had that feeling. Once it's Russia, you're closed in.
You're stuck.
Yeah, I remember hearing that even when I, in 38, 39, when they were talking about Russia, that it's nobody comes out, nobody goes in. So I even at that time had that idea about Russia. Because it was, I think, during the time, 36, 39, that Stalin put a curtain up, nobody somehow could go in or go out, or it was very difficult.
So you heard stories that nobody comes out of Russia.
Yeah, and at that time during the war, they say that they were raping women and did this and that, so. Anyhow, Oma wanted to get towards Bette anyhow, just in case Opa is alive or survives. And at the time
What year is this now?
I think this was 44 now.
Okay.
44. And Oma is trying to get some of our things. Oh, Oma, too bad Oma never told her stories. She had also so many stories to tell. Oma was sending all our whatever we had, our bed clothes or whatever could be transported. Naturally, you couldn't transport furniture, but whatever you needed for livelihoods. You need your pillows, you need your blankets, you need your pots and pans and food and clothes. And she was going to send that towards or to Częstochowa, where we are. And somebody Oma was very, very liked by everyone. The Polish, the Jewish, Oma was just liked by everyone. Everybody loved her, and everybody was concerned, And when she went to the railroad station and told them she was going to put this on the train so it would go to Częstochowa, they told her, "No, Mrs. Teichmann, don't send it today. Send it some other time. Don't send." But she couldn't figure why shouldn't she send it today, and she put it on. That train was attacked by the partisans, because at that time partisans attacked trains, this and that. And naturally, everything was taken out or plundered or whatever, All our things was gone. Whatever she still had was gone, and she was so upset. Then, a few days later, all the things showed up.
Wow.
It was our name, Oma's name on there, the address. She thinks that the partisan who found all the things, who shut up the train, knew about us.
Gave all the stuff back.
And sent all the things.
Wow, that's a story.
Continued to send all the things. So that's one of the just other little stories. There's so many,
that's
many,
amazing,
many
really.
stories that Oma had and told. And then she came to Częstochowa and she said she wants to take me to Germany, try to get back to her parents. We didn't know how would they accept us, what will happen to us there. She hoped somehow we can survive. And so she picked me up, and Gerhard was with her, and we went to Germany. I think that was the summer of 44. And, well, we came to her mother's, and we stayed in Germany for a few months. but also my aunt lived there at the time, and it was really crowded. And she decided it's maybe not too safe to stay in Wetter. Everybody knew us, and some rumors were around, and she wasn't sure if if they're going to leave us alone. I mean, there were no Jewish people in Germany anymore at that time. That's it. And but she thought maybe by being with her parents that we would have some protection. But eventually, she thought probably not. And one of the tenants that lived in my grandmother's house had married a Yugoslav boy, and she said, "Why don't you come? My in-laws live in not Yugoslav, Sudetenland, someplace. Why don't you come there? You'll feel safer there. Go." So we went with her to the Sudetenland, and they were very nice to us. They let us stay with them for a while until we somehow found ourselves a room someplace, which wasn't in the same town, a little village next to it. So that little village, we stayed all during that summer. Was it summer? Or during that winter. During that winter. Now I remember it was during that winter. Because there were some young men there who somehow had cut off skis and said, and skied down a slope. There was some snow. And at one time they said, "Why don't you try it?" And that was the first time I put skis on and went down that slope. And I didn't fall. So we stayed that winter there, and somehow we felt kind of safe. Nobody knew, nobody bothered us. Then the fighting came closer to that direction. And eventually Elsie also came from Częstochowa and joined us there. And so all four of us were in that, we had one room that we all shared. But there Elsie met a friend there, and this friend was German, and the friend decided to go to Prague. It's a bigger city, and so on and so on. And Elsie is adventurous, and she decided to go with her, even though Mama said, "Let's stay together, let's stay together. At least we know where that we're all together." But Elsie decided to go to Prague with her. So, and then we didn't hear from Elsie till a year after the war, and we did not know if she survived the war or what happened to her. So Mama was right, we should have stayed together. And as you call it, the front where the fighting is, came closer, the Russian front, we decided, well, let's try to go closer to the German border again. Maybe the other side. I don't know if we heard it. Oh, we heard at the time, this must have been the beginning of 45. The spring of 45. We heard some, the Czechs, maybe they had a radio hidden someplace or something, that they got some news. And we also heard that Roosevelt had died. So do you know exactly when he died?
I believe that was early in 45.
Was it March or sometimes? We heard that Roosevelt, or April.
I think it might have been in March.
In March, that he had died. So we knew also that somehow on the other side the Americans are coming. It's not just the Russians, the Americans are fighting, and they are coming into Germany, and we definitely wanted to get into that direction, the western part, and towards Wetter. So somehow with any transport, even if it was an army transport, Oma begged them, can you let us on, can we go with you, and so on. So we little by little, they didn't know we were Jewish. At that time, people were coming from the eastern part and trying to get into the western section of Germany. And some of them let us on their trucks for a while. And Oma, we always had the suitcases that she saved, and the bags with the blankets and pillows and whatever, we always had to carry with us, and try to get enough food from someplace, to beg around for food. I don't know if she still had cigarettes to exchange or what. I don't know how Oma handled all this, but she was like a
Heroin.
fighter, a fighter. And at one point, I think there were some. Oh, at one of these transports, there were German convoys, and it was attacked by fighters. Now, I don't know if they were probably Russian fighters. And we heard them zoom over or coming, and Oma said, jump out, run into the, it was like the country. Here was the road, and there it went down a little bit, an embankment and fields and so on. And Oma yelled to me, run, jump off the truck and run. And I just did what Oma said. I jump off and I run into the field there. And I hide down, there were some water, what do you call them, like...
Ditches?
Like little ditches, and I get into a ditch. And I didn't know what Oma was doing. There were other people on there with kids. And naturally, Oma, the way she is, she helps them to get their kids out, and she doesn't run right away. She helps them to get the kids out and jumps out the other side of the embankment. And as it happens, the fighters all came in around that way, the other embankment. Not where I was, but this embankment it came by. So she afterwards told me that people on that side were killed left and right. And she had took some suitcases with her when she jumped down and kind of put them on top of her, kind of hid herself under it. So I'm glad that I jumped to the other side and didn't see what was going on there. Mm. And then right after it was over, she came, out and into the fields and called my name, So eventually she found me and I found her. I got back to the convoy and we started walking because that convoy came to a standstill. That's it. It was all shut up. So she didn't even let me get back. She found me and she didn't even want me to go back there to the convoy to see. So she had a few suitcases, so she gave one to carry to me and she carried two, and we started walking to wherever is the next town. And the next town, I was in such shock from this shooting, this attack, even though I was
on the other side of the road.
But I knew what was going on, that I was kind of in shock a little bit. I always was so soft, so sensitive right away that I'm so...
Seeing people killed is
so
shocking.
So we walked to the other town, but we just kind of reached the edge, and I said, Mama, I can't, and I almost fell down, and I just was lying on the grass. That's it. I couldn't move anymore. I was just kind of like half in a daze and as if I was fainting, and I had to just lie down flat. And after I don't know how long I was there, and then Mama said, come, we will find some place where we can go in, and she found, since she could, this was, I think, still part of Czechoslovakia, or was it already, I don't know exactly where this was. I think this was still where they all spoke Czech, because we went into a German, they always had their little offices there, the soldiers, and she went in there, and somehow I slept. All I can remember, I just was sleeping there. They had their cots there, and I just slept. I don't know for how long. And then afterwards she found someplace, a room where she could take me so I could sleep it off. And we went to sleep someplace in a room. And I remember I had the craziest dreams. And all pleasant dreams, the strange things about people who loved me, guys that fell in love with me, and guys that loved me. And at 14, I have these crazy dreams. Anyhow, right afterwards, after I slept, I woke up. I was myself again. I felt much better. But somehow I must have just been in shock from that,
So what happened after that?
What did we do after? How did we get? Oh, then she again found another transport, another, transport that would take us a stretch. And we were on this transport. I think these soldiers wanted some favors from Oma. And she wasn't quite willing, so they decided to dump us on the side of the road. And that was someplace, that was already Germany. That was a little town in Oberschlesien, it's called. And it was very mountainous, and you saw some houses or farms on the hill. And right there on that road, they said, okay, we'll let you off right here. And they took all our stuff, put it out, and there we were. So Oma started walking up to some of the houses and asking, can we stay here? I have 2 children, and so on and so on. And they took us in. And it was like a farm, just a woman there and her husband, and I remember he had asthma. But she fed us, the woman. She had potatoes, cooked potatoes with some cheese, white cheese or something, cottage cheese. So that was our supper. And there was another girl, and her mother was there too, I think, at the time, that somehow got caught there. And that was the place where we were rescued. And we were eventually rescued by the Russians.
What was that
You
like?
call it free, or you might say we were called freed by the Russians. That was, well, it must have been sometime in April. Sometime in April, early spring, So we were sleeping naturally all on the floor because, I don't know, the woman didn't have the beds. We were sleeping on the floor, Gerhard, Mama, and me. And we were covered up with our blankets. That's one thing. Oma always took the blankets and the pillows kind of wrapped up for us. And we were covered up to here. And at night, all of a sudden, we hear the door opens. Somebody put a flashlight, looks in, walks out again. The Russians. They just walked in. They saw we all little children, kind of covered up to here. And they left us alone. Nobody bothered us. They would have known there's a woman there, forget it. Or maybe it happens that there were a few guys who, they weren't all the same.
So what happened after that?
Well, then that whole area was occupied by Russian and then Polish. A few days later, the Polish occupied it. So I don't know, somehow they made a deal that part of Germany became a Polish. So it was somehow occupied.
So where did you guys go after
Polish
that?
and Russians. Well, we stayed there for a while with that woman, and we tried to get food to eat. We went, there was not far from there was a German town, Reichenhall or something, which was like a summer place, and Bade, mineral waters, real, and Kurort it's called. It was beautiful town, beautiful little town, really like a park, And everything was open, the Kurhaus, everything was open. We just walked in and took the cans and took food. They had food, it was piled up with food in there. So we just walked there one day. It was about 10 kilometers. We walked there and we brought food back. So now we at least had plenty of food. Which in a way it's called plundering. Plunder. So Gerhard and I and Oma, we got what we could carry and carried it back to the place where we stayed. And then after, I don't know how long we stayed there, then Oma decided, well, maybe now we should try to get to Wette, see to Prague, because we knew Elsie was supposed to be there. So Oma wanted to go to Prague. and first to Prague, and then try to go to Wetter. Now, how do you find someone in Prague? Anyhow, but I had to go with her, and for Gerhard, we found a room in that town that I said, the the Kurort, was German people, very nice people. So Gerhard stayed with them, and Oma and I started on a new adventure.
Searching for Elsie?
Trying to get, what do you mean, just searching. How do you get from one place to another? Things were in ruins. There were no trains scheduled. You just had to somehow, you know, find. Anywhere you saw a truck, where are you going? Can we go with you? Food, you had to go back. And as a matter of fact, we went to, the Russians had what you call the canteen where they cooked their food in. And I went over there. Now, Oma never really learned to speak Polish well. She just always just a few words and just really couldn't communicate. But I spoke very well. So I went over to the Russians and I asked them for some food, if we could have some food. They weren't very pleasant. They didn't really give us anything. I told them we were Jewish. Didn't make any impression on them. Nothing. Nothing. Didn't have any meaning at all. They weren't helpful. I don't know. I mean, at that time, they must have already found some concentration camps that they're freed, that they're. But anyhow, so, and we tried to. How did we try to get onto a train? How did we get to Prague? Let me think, because I right now can't think how we did it. All right, Oma and I got to Prague somehow, and we tried all the administrations that were around, any office, to see if we could find Elsie someplace. They have an idea of.
You couldn't find her?
We couldn't find her in Prague. We couldn't find her. Then we decided, well, we have to try to get to Wetter now. And again, the same thing. You try to get a ride with some truck, with someone, or you sit at the railroad stations if it wasn't completely demolished, and you try to get a train that would leave. It didn't matter where. As long as it was going west, you would go on it. And eventually, we got to Bavaria, into Bavaria. And on the train in Bavaria, we met the first Jewish people. We heard them speak Jewish, and we saw they were all shaved. They were still almost bald because their heads were shaved. And we heard them talk Jewish, and we started talking to them, and we started asking them questions, where and what and how, and are there many or so, because we really didn't know if any Jews survived, where they were, what was going on. So they told us, yes, there are many Jewish people who survived, and not very far from there, they had a Jewish community which they opened up, community house where all the Jewish people can stay and live right now and eat. Anybody who's coming from a camp or who's freed, who is. So they said, why don't you come with us there, and you can stay there, and you get some food, you can stay, and so on. So we went with them, and we stayed there. Naturally, we were exhausted. And they took us to the community center and introduced us to the people in charge that run it. And somehow they got us a room where we could stay and food. And your father tells me that where we got this room and we had to sleep it off because Oma and I were so exhausted, he came to see, they were his friends, and he came to see his friends, and he saw me the first time when I was sleeping there. I didn't see him, but he said he saw me there. Anyhow, so that's where we stayed, in the community center that was called Schwandorf in Bavaria, for quite a few weeks, and Oma got sick. So that was also the reason. I think after all this tension, after all this,
Finally got to
what
her.
she was fighting and what she was struggling got to her, and she got sick.
What did she have?
Well, what she had the same thing before the war, before we had to leave Germany, and maybe it was also the tension at that time of things that were building up, you know. She had got these big lumps under her arm, which filled up with pus, and at that time you didn't have antibiotics or anything like that, so it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually it opened by itself, but this big under her arm. It must have been terrible. So that's what she had there, and eventually it opened up and it healed up again, and she got better. And then she decided she's going by herself now, because now we're in Germany. She speaks German, and she can find her way, and she feels I am safe. I'm in a place where I'm safe. And I had met your father already at the time, during this time. And I think I already told how I met your father a little bit before. And while she was on her way, trying to get to Wetter, I moved with one of the girls that also survived, a survivor. I moved to Bayreuth, and there were also some other people, Jewish people, who moved to Bayreuth. So I found a room in Bayreuth with a family, a nice house. And I waited to hear, to see from Oma, you know. Oh, I forgot. There's something very important which I should mention first. In this community center where we stayed, you know, that's where we ate. Everybody ate supper there. Everybody somehow they tried to keep people, have them come back to a little bit normal life. Have some music sometimes, and there even was a wedding shortly afterwards, just a few weeks afterwards. The young people met each other and they're married. And always new different people came in from different camps. Came in, maybe stayed for a while, and then went someplace else, tried to search or for the survivors or for a family or whatever. And at one time, a man showed up, and he said, you know, whenever somebody new came, people tried to find out, have you met? Do you know who this is? Do you know if this is alive? Have you met my family? Everybody always tries to get information. And when he heard our name, he said, Teichmann. I was with Teichmann in Auschwitz, in concentration camp. Oh, this was the first time we heard from Opa that, you know, that somebody heard about him in Auschwitz. What happened? When? How? So he told us that he was in the same barrack with Opa in Auschwitz. And one night, Opa's number was called. Naturally, everybody had a number. And he was called out of the barrack all by himself, nobody else, just him. And he was never heard of again, and he was never seen again. So the man said to us, Mrs. Teichmann, I think you should be prepared. Your husband is definitely not alive. And Oma was all upset, you know, and I said, Mama, that's not true. That's not true. I know that my papa is alive. I know he's alive. He's not dead. And nobody could convince me, you know, no matter how the circumstance, how it looked at the time. I mean, you called somebody out of a barracks and you were sure that was the end of it. And I just didn't believe it. And so that was one episode, but Oma wasn't sure, but she thought the guy's probably right, that Opa wouldn't be alive. And then she went to go towards Wetter to see if Elsie was alive. Elsie would try to be there. If not Opa, Elsie would try to be there. And I, at the time when Omar had left, went with this girlfriend to live in Bayreuth, because also this married couple had gone to found themselves a room there and lived in Bayreuth. And I went in Bayreuth. And your father, Mietek, I call him Mietek, came sometimes to Bayreuth to see me, to stay there. And one morning, since it was springtime, my girlfriend and I were going out to see our friends up the street. And as there was a little yard with a fence around it, as I was coming out the gate and looking down the road, all of a sudden I see a car driving up. Now at that time you saw very few cars, just passenger cars. And I look again and I say, my God, this looks just like the car we used to have in Germany. Isn't that strange? And it was coming up very, very slowly, driving up the street. And I just stand there and look at the car coming closer and closer. You know, and my girlfriend just came up behind me. I said, oh my God, how strange. It's just definitely just like the car, the same color, the same. And slowly as it came up towards the house, stopped in front of the house, and I look at the car, look at the person inside the car, and it was Opa sitting inside the car. And I was, for I don't know how long, just glued to one spot, speechless, wordless, just standing there looking, not believing, not realizing, is this true, is this not true? And then all of a sudden, Opa opens the door of the car, and I start running to that car and screaming and crying, Papa, Papa. And he came out.
How did he get his old car back?
We fell into each other's arms and hugged and kissed and cried and laughed at the same time. It was so unbelievable. And then Omar came out of the other side, you know, the passenger side. He came around. And then after a while he told us, how it happened, what happened, He's alive. And he came back to Wette, hoping to find us there, but we weren't there. And at the time when he came to pick me up, he came to Bayreuth, he looked already better. He was already out of camp quite a few weeks and got back to almost his normal self. He looked like himself. So that was such an experience. It was such an unbelievable experience. It's impossible to really describe that feeling, that you haven't seen your father in years and somebody tells you he's probably dead, and all of a sudden there he comes up. Not only himself, but in the car that I remembered from how many? 6 years ago. I was only 9 when we left Germany. Now I was 14, and I remember that is the way the car looked. That was the way our car looked. And it was the car. It was someplace hidden because they had taken the wheel off. It was someplace in a garage, sitting in a garage without wheels. And when Opa came back, he got his car back. And he was driving now to Bavaria, to where I was. They went to Schwandorf and then found out that I am now in Bayreuth, and were slowly trying to look for the house, the number where I was, the house number. So that was a pleasant experience.
Quite a story.
A happy ending. The happy ending for us, because our close family, Opa, Oma, Gerhard and Elsie, we all survived. And that is so unusual that any family survived completely. Because if we would have stayed in Germany at that time, in 38, we wouldn't have survived, because the Germans just took all the half-Jews and didn't survive either. So,
Any
we
final thoughts at this point?
at this point, final thoughts. Well, at that time, you know, all you were thinking of, the war is over. The war is over. Now justice is done. The war is over. The Germans lost, and Papa survived. And in the meantime, I found a man that I fell in love with. So it was just starting to live towards a new life, a new beginning.